If you've ever watched Formula 1 or played any of the F1 games such as F1 22, you should be roughly aware of how ERS works. However, both F1 22 and F1 Manager 22 handle ERS deployment completely differently, and this can make it a little confusing when first jumping into F1 Manager 22. But don't worry, in this video I'm going to run through exactly how ERS works in F1 Manager 22. I'll show you how to set the best ERS mode for a variety of situations, how to deploy ERS correctly, and how to get out of an ERS deficit. ERS in F1 Manager 22 is controlled during a race, quali or practice session from the driver information hub in the bottom left and right corners of the screen. As you can see here, I'm looking at Lando Norris and managing his ERS usage. Within this screen there are a few things you should look out for. The first few things you should really pay attention to are the top figures. You'll see that on the left there's a blue bar which represents how much ERS you've deployed per lap. Then there's a yellow bar to the right of this which shows how much ERS you have harvested per lap. Then in the centre of these two bars is an overall percentage. This shows your overall percentage of how full your battery is. This will read 100% when you have a completely full battery and will go down the more you deploy ERS. If the bar hits 0, it means your driver has completely run out of ERS and will no longer be able to deploy it until he's harvested some more. And then underneath these bars are the Ers Strategy Modes that you can deploy for each driver. There are 5 different ERS strategies that you can deploy in F1 Manager 22. Each strategy will either harvest or burn a different amount of energy per lap, and each of the different deployment modes will allow your driver to deploy ERS in a different way per lap. You'll be able to see next to each strategy how much faster or slower your driver will be with each mode enabled, and this is represented by the green or red up and down arrows. And then next to these arrows are the amounts of energy that will be stored or burned each lap with each particular mode enabled. Now this isn't overly clear and is a question I get asked a lot. Why do the Overtake, Defend and Deploy all use the same amount of ERS but they're not as fast as each other, and how does this exactly work? And to be fair, it confused me when I first jumped into F1 Manager 22. So let's take a look at the deployment modes and just see how each one affects your driver and how fast they'll be going. So the deploy mode will increase your lap times the most and should be used in qualifying and when trying to put some hot laps in during a race, maybe going for fastest lap or putting in a really fast in lap to the pits or an out lap. Then the neutral mode is the setting you should probably use the most during a race, as this will keep your ERS relatively balanced. You shouldn't go up or down too much. Then harvest, that will recoup some energy during a lap by deploying the least amount of ERS, and you'll essentially start to increase your battery lap on lap. One of the biggest questions I get asked though is what is the difference in overtake, defend and deploy? After all, they use the same amount of ERS each lap, so how do they differ? And this is a great question and one that can be really confusing. But the difference is in how your driver uses the ERS through the lap. With the overtake and defend ERS modes, your driver will tactically use ERS to attack or defend in spots around the lap which are good overtaking spots. They'll dump a lot of ERS in one go to maximise their speed down a long straight, for example. The deploy mode is the fastest and will have your driver using the full 4 megajoules of ERS per lap at different points around the lap, but they'll use it in a more balanced manner when compared to the overtake or defend modes. This is the best deployment mode to be in when trying to set the fastest lap of the race or during a qualifying lap. Okay, so with the basics now covered, let's jump into a real scenario and see how ERS actually works in F1 Manager 22, as it isn't quite as simple as I just made out. So to start with, I'm going to go back to the blue and yellow bars at the top of the ERS screen. These are the two most important areas to keep an eye on when managing ERS. The left blue bar is your deployment bar. Each car can deploy up to 4 megajoules of ERS every lap. Once you've deployed 4 MJ in a single lap, you'll no longer be able to deploy any more ERS until you cross the start line and this bar resets. That is the case even if you do have ERS left in your battery. This is a limit enforced for every car to avoid drivers deploying too much ERS each lap. The yellow bar on the right hand side is your harvest bar. This shows how much ERS you have recovered during a single lap. ERS is recovered during the braking zones by converting braking force into energy. You'll notice this bar going up as your driver brakes into each corner. Much like the deployment, you have a limit on how much ERS you can recover each lap. and this is capped at 2 mj per lap. Once you've recovered 2 megajoules of energy, you stop harvesting for the remainder of the lap, and you'll probably hit that limit pretty early on during the lap. But once you cross the start-finish line to start another lap, both of these bars will reset down to 0, and you can start deploying and harvesting again. Now, there is a big problem here that you may have already noticed, and that is that you can deploy 4 megajoules of ERS per lap, but can only recover 2. So just a quick note, even when you have a high ERS mode set such as Overtake, you will still harvest energy during the braking zones. This means that if you set a high deployment mode such as Overtake or Defend, you'll be deploying 4 megajoules of ERS but recovering 2 megajoules. This gives you that deficit of -2 per lap, which is indicated on the right hand side of each command. But if you set the ERS command to harvest, why does it only say that we'll recover 1 megajoule of energy per lap when we can harvest up to 2? Well, this is because when you set the ERS to harvest, your driver will still use some ERS throughout the lap. The amount that is used is around 1 megajoule per lap, allowing you to recover around 1 megajoule of additional ERS each lap on average. It's very handy to stay on board for a few laps with your driver while having the Ers Strategy menu open, so you can watch the blue and yellow bars go up and down and learn kind of where they're deploying and harvesting. You'll quickly notice that you harvest the maximum 2 megajoules of ERS pretty quickly around a lap. But if you have a full deployment mode active, you'll be able to use ERS for the majority of the lap before you reach the 4 megajoule deployment limit. So now we've got a pretty good understanding of how ERS works. Let's take a look at a few examples of ERS usage during a race. When trying to overtake or defend against other drivers, it's useful to use either overtake or defend ERS modes. These will allow your driver to deploy ERS in different parts around the lap. You won't be able to use these modes for too long though, as you will start to deplete your battery pretty quickly. It's ideal to have a relatively full battery before trying to overtake or defend. If you have a full battery, you'll have roughly 2 laps of full deployment available before you completely run out. You can manage the ERS commands throughout different parts of the lap, so if you're racing around Monaco for example, you can change the ERS mode to neutral through the first sector to keep your battery pretty level. Then, as you approach the tunnel and the Nouvelle Chicane, which is one of the only overtaking spots on the track, you can enable Overtake Mode. It's always advisable to enable Overtake Mode a few corners before the actual overtaking spot to allow your driver to close the gap and get ready for an overtake attempt. Once you either pass the car in front or the overtaking opportunity is completely over, you can drop the ERS back down to neutral. And remember that if you do leave your driver on overtake or defend, or even the full deploy mode, and you do accidentally run out of ERS, you'll have to spend a few laps with the harvest mode enabled to replenish your battery stores. And that brings me nicely on to what to do if you run out of ERS. It's an issue that we've all probably had at some point. Either we've forgotten to take our driver out of a deployment mode and accidentally drained our battery, or we've left overtake on too long trying to pass a car in front. But when this happens, you're going to be in an ERS deficit and you'll need to know how to get out of it. Now, the first thing you'll need to do is change your ERS deployment mode to harvest. This will start to replenish your battery each lap, but it won't go up anywhere near as fast as it depletes. As I mentioned above, when you're using an aggressive ERS mode, you will get roughly 2 laps of full deployment before your battery drains from 100% to 0%. But when you're harvesting, you can only regain around half the amount that you can expend. Going back to the blue and yellow bars, you can deploy 4 megajoules per lap but only harvest 2. But the issue is that even when you're in harvest mode, your driver will still be using some ERS around the lap, around 1 megajoules worth. This means that even when harvesting, you'll only gain around 1 megajoule of battery per lap. With this in mind, it means that it will take roughly 4 whole laps with the ERS set to harvest to fully replenish your battery. If you have a car behind you and you're at a risk of being overtaken, 4 laps with little to no ERS assistance can be dangerous. So it's a very good idea to ensure that you don't run your battery down to empty. Try to always keep some ERS in the tank, and try to use the harvest ERS mode during moments where you're less at risk of losing positions. Now moving on to some other scenarios where ERS deployment is important, and the first one that comes to mind is the start of a race. This is easily your best opportunity during a race to gain some easy positions. So I would always advise that you change both your driver's ERS modes to overtake, as well as increasing their pace and fuel usage commands for the start of the race. This will ensure your drivers are on full attack mode for the first half a lap of the race and give them the best chance of moving up the grid. This can be configured before the race starts in the strategy screen, and I'd recommend getting into the habit of doing this when choosing a driver's strategy before a race. After around half a lap or so, or once your driver's settled into a rhythm, I'd highly recommend lowering some of the pace, fuel and ERS commands. This will allow your drivers to settle into their race strategy and avoid you burning too much ERS, fuel or tyres too early in the race. Other than the race start, the next best part of the race to gain positions is during the pit sequences. Pitting earlier or later and either undercutting or overcutting drivers around you can help you gain positions without having to physically overtake them on track. And you can use your ERS to help with this. I would recommend trying to ensure you have a relatively full battery as you approach your pit window. This will allow you to use the ERS deploy mode to put in an extremely fast lap either on your way in or your way out of the pits. If a driver in front or behind you pits a lap before you, use the deploy mode to put in a fast lap on your in lap to potentially beat them out after you've made your pit stop. Or if you pit earlier than the cars around you, you can deploy ERS on your out lap to undercut them. This can be extremely powerful as overtaking on track can be hard in F1 Manager, especially if you're stuck in a DRS train of cars. One part of a race which can really help you recover your battery stores is during a safety car. If a safety car or VSC is deployed, you can only drive to a certain pace. This makes using high deployment modes or fast pace modes a little bit irrelevant. As soon as a safety car is deployed, turn down your driver's ERS mode to harvest. There is no benefit at this point in deploying excess ERS. These moments can be invaluable during a race as they allow you to reset your ERS over a couple of laps, as well as helping you recoup some excess fuel and preserve your tyres for a few laps. Safety cars can be a big game changer for this exact reason, and they can really mix up the race. So try to be on the ball and use them to your advantage where you can. But remember, as a safety car enters the pits and the race resumes, ensure you turn your pace, fuel and ERS modes back up. A safety car restart can give you the opportunity to attack cars ahead of you, so it may be worth using some ERS overtake during a restart. Now hopefully this guide has been extremely helpful and has helped explain ERS in F1 Manager a little bit. It can be very confusing with the green and red arrows, along with the -2, 0 and +1 indicators. I don't think the interface does an overly good job of explaining ERS to those who are unfamiliar with how it works, but hopefully that's where this video steps in. If you've enjoyed this video or found it helpful, hit that like button and let me know in the comments below. And also subscribe as well. I release daily F1 and sim racing content, so if you like what you hear, hit that subscribe button. But until next time guys, I'll see you on track.